Hello class, welcome to Pre-Algebra Lesson 7-2, which is all about solving two-step equations involving the distributive property. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to write and solve two-step equations of the form P times the quantity of x plus q equals r. All right, so let's just jump right in. Yesterday you guys practiced solving two-step equations, and we talked about the don't call me after midnight. And the first step of that was something that you didn't really have to worry about yesterday, which was distributing. So today we start with that, okay? So we start by distributing. So we'd say 3 times x is 3x. 3 times a positive 5 is positive 15 equals 45. All right, so I get to cross the D off now, and I move on to C, combining like terms. I look and I see, okay, I have a term with an x, I have just a regular term. I can't combine those, and then the 45 is on the other side of the equal sign, so I am going to cross that one off. All right, and then the M was move the variables to one side, which if you look, we already only have the variable on one side. So I'm going to cross that one off. Now I move on to the add and subtract. Okay, so 3x plus 15. Since I know I want to move things away from the x, I'm going to move that plus 15 first. So the opposite of plus 15 is minus 15. So I have 3x equals 45 minus 15, which is 30. I don't have any adding or subtracting left. Now I'm going to do the multiply and divide. So to get x all by itself right now, it is being multiplied by 3, so I would divide by 3. Divide by 3. So I have x equals 30 divided by 3 is 10. Okay, so the first thing I did was distribute. Looked if there were any like terms to combine, and there were not. Make sure the variable is on one side, which it already was. Then I subtracted, and then I divided. Okay? Why don't you go ahead and solve this one on your own? Good luck. Okay, when you solve this problem, hopefully you started by distributing, and then discovered there were no like terms to combine. There was no moving the variable today. So what you need to do is add 42 first and then divide by negative 7. When you do those steps in that order, you should have ended up at D equals negative 13. If you have questions, please be sure to ask for some help. Let's move on to our next problem. So I just showed you guys how to solve using the don't call me after midnight. I'm going to show you kind of a shortcut. So it has to do with the distributing. I'm going to call this distribute or divide. And the reason I'm going to call it that is because whenever you have something written that could be distributed, a shortcut, because I know you guys love shortcuts, is that you can divide by that number outside. So I can divide by 5 on both sides. And the reason I can do that is because distributing is just multiplying. So how do you undo multiplying? You divide. So if I divide by 5, I'm left with n minus 2. So you're just left with whatever was in the parentheses. And then negative 30 divided by 5 is negative 6. And then how do I get n by itself? So I distributed, divided, no like terms to combine. Variables already only on one side. So now I would add or subtract. So here it's subtracting 2, so I would add 2. So I have n equals negative 4. and the n's already by itself, so there isn't anything to multiply or divide. So that is another way to solve two-step equations involving the distributive property. Is instead of distributing, you can divide by the number that you are going to distribute. Okay? Both of them are acceptable ways to do the problem. You can choose which one's most comfortable for you, but I want you to go ahead and solve this problem on your own. Good luck. Okay, hopefully you ended up at y equals -8. You can see on the left here in the green, I solved the first way I showed you by distributing and then solving. And then in the blue on the right, I showed you the shortcut where I divide rather than distribute. And you can see I ended up at -8 both ways. So hopefully you can compare your work to mine with whichever method you chose and see either if you made a mistake or maybe you did everything perfectly. But if you have questions, please be sure to ask for some help. Let's move on to example 3. Okay, so now we have these two-step equations with some fractions. So I'm going to show you guys the two different ways to solve. Okay, so I'm going to just put one over here. So I'm going to start by doing the method where you distribute. Okay, so if I distribute, then this would become 2/3 n plus 4. 2/3 times 6 is 4 equals 10. Okay, so distributed, there aren't any like terms to combine. The variable is already on one side. So now I'm going to subtract 4. So I have 2/3 n equals 6. And then I'm going to divide by 2/3. Divide by 2/3. So I have n equals, and then dividing by a fraction, remember, we learned about earlier in the year, is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So in this case, I know that this equals 9. However, if you have a calculator, you can also just type in 6 divided by 2/3. Just make sure that you type it into the calculator like this. You would hit 6 divided by parentheses 2 divided by 3. So if you're going to type 6 divided by 2/3, this is how you would type it in on your calculator. And you should get 9. Okay? Then let's practice the way where you don't distribute. You start by dividing instead. So here I would begin by dividing by 2/3, dividing by 2/3. So I would have n plus 6 equals, and then I don't have a calculator with me right now, so that's why I am doing things by hand. So I would do 10 times 3 is 30, divided by 2 is 15. So again, that's something you could type into your calculator. You type 10 divided by parentheses 2 divided by 3. Okay, so you would type that in, and you'd get 15. Now I'm going to subtract 6, and I'm left with n equals 9. So you can see I got the same answer either way. If you don't get that same answer and you're using a calculator, double check to make sure you're typing it in correctly, okay? Those parentheses, if you don't use them, it's not going to work. All right. I want you to solve this one on your own. Good luck. All right, hopefully with this problem you ended up at v equals negative 59. If you did not get that answer, check your work against mine. And let's move on to the last example for the day. Okay, now we are going to practice writing and solving an equation to determine the total distance Mackenzie drives to and from school. So this is what we know. Mackenzie drives the same distance to and from school each day. She also drives 1 3/4 miles round trip each day to go to the library. During a 5-day school week, Mackenzie drives a total of 50 miles. So this is where we're going to write and solve an equation to determine the total distance to and from school. Okay, so let's start with, we have the same distance to and from school each day, but it doesn't give us an exact number there, so that's when we use a variable. Okay, so we know that she's driving a certain number of miles to get to school and to get back, but we don't know what it is. And then we also know she's driving an additional, right, 1 3/4 miles to get to the library. And then that she's doing that combined 5 days a week for school. And we know that it totals 50 miles. So that's how you would write an equation. Okay, so you would say the unknown distance plus the distance to the library times 5 days a week equals the total. So that's how we would write that out. And then to solve it, we could start by dividing by 5, divide by 5. I get x plus 1 3/4 equals 10. And then I could say, or I guess I don't have to change colors. I could subtract 1 3/4, 1 3/4, and that would give me x equals 8 1/4, or 8.25 miles is the distance she drives to and from school. So remember, x represented that distance. Okay, so hopefully that setting up didn't seem too bad. On the next slide, I'm gonna list an example problem for you, and then it's gonna be multiple choice with you selecting which equation would be correct. You don't have to solve it, just finding the correct equation. Okay, so Vanessa makes 7 identical flower arrangements for the tables at a banquet. Each arrangement contains some roses and 9 tulips. Vanessa uses a total of 147 flowers to make the arrangements. Write an equation that can be used to determine the number of roses are in each arrangement. Okay, so I want you to look through these problems, and I want you to figure out which one of these would make the most sense, or which of these would work to determine how many roses are used. Good luck. All right, hopefully you said letter A. So we know that we use roses. We don't know how many, so we use R, plus 9 tulips. And we know that there are a total of 7 flower arrangements. So you would add the flowers together, multiply by 7, and it would equal the total. Okay. If you have questions about this or anything else, please don't hesitate to ask for some help. I am happy to help you. Have a great day.